Chad, I think I've stumbled across a weird idiosyncrasy of the English language. Okay, you ready for this?
How unique.
I'm gonna
You know, the English language is known for its consistency and its thoroughness, and idiosyncrasy is really something else here.
Yeah, exactly. If there's one language that's like, I would like to set some rules and then follow it, it's English. Yeah. Which was not at all cobbled together using German dictionaries that a drunk man found on a street. So I'm going to say some things, and you're going to point out to me where the weird idiosyncrasy is, okay?
Yes.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
2:38 o'clock.
2:38. I think we found the one that doesn't fit.
Why can you not? It sounds so weird to say 4:30 o'clock.
Yeah.
Or 7:28 o'clock.
You can only say it at the top of the hour. You can only say it at the beginning. You can't say it anytime after the other 58 minutes.
Like, say it out loud. Say it out loud. A non-top of the hour.
4:15 o'clock. No, it does not fit.
The mouthfeel is wrong. It sounds wrong. It feels wrong. It sounds like you don't know what you're doing. Like you've stumbled into a room and you're trying to catch up to a conversation quickly and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I guarantee if somebody stops you waiting for the bus and they ask you what time it is and you say 4:15 o'clock, they're going to take 2 steps in the opposite direction.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this man absolutely, there's something going on here.
Yeah, that's so weird. And also, what does the O stand for? I always wondered if the person who first started time was like Irish with this o'clock stuff. What does the O stand for?
Can you think of another word in English? Like, imagine you're learning English as a second language, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to o'clock.
O'clock.
You're like, what is any of this? Why does this word exist? Why is this one word have an O apostrophe clock? What is that nonsense? That makes no sense.
It's the weirdest contraction. Like, I could swing with don't and doesn't and can't and couldn't.
Yeah,
those all, they're common enough that I get it, and they're all the same. The N apostrophe T, right? And even could have and would have. All right, that's fine. But there's o'clock is the only one that we do O apostrophe in front of. It's a straggler.
I looked it up, and it's the first definition of, there's 3 or 4, but the first definition is of or according to the clock. So we're referring to the clock as though it is a source of like it's a scientist on a talk show that's talking about environmental change. Like, o'clock, according to the clock.
It's one of the clock.
Yeah, what of the clock? I mean, but I give up on English. 4:30 o'clock? What is that nonsense? We can't have this.
Well, okay, I'll grant you that. But I was just at Disney World. We had a vacation down there. And, you're waiting in line. And of course, you're kind of, people watching a little bit. The only thing weirder than the whole o'clock is people who actually, they open their phone and it's on military time. It's 13 o'clock 42. Now that is weird. I cannot get. And by the way, there's no way. It's like it's 9 o'clock at night. I get, but 16:30. Forget about it. I don't know what time it is anymore.
So here's the thing. I will agree with you that the 24-hour clock to me is very strange. I do not understand it. It feels weird. But by this is where I'll disagree with you. By every stretch of logic or of smooth functioning society, a 24-hour clock makes so much more sense than a 12-hour clock.
Yeah,
right?
but
there are so many times in your life where you've gotten confused because you wrote 12 p.m. and you're like, wait, which 12? Or you're like, well, you wrote 12 o'clock, and you're like, yeah, but which 12 o'clock? You know what I mean? Like a 24-hour clock, bam, it's 9 o'clock at night. You don't have to do the 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night. You know instantly. We have 24 numbers. It's no stretch for us to use a 24-hour clock. It logically makes more sense.
Okay.
But to Americans, it is so damn weird.
Now tell me, 8:15 p.m. in military time. Go.
2015?
Exactly. You got to do the math in your head. You can't do it.
Here's the thing.
It takes too long.
It's a pain point for Americans, but it's like metric. We've just got to do it at some point. We can't be doing this well. It's 6 fathoms away, and we've got to stop with the weird things from the 14th century.
You know, like a bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck.
Oh my God! And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the metric-focused 4:30 o'clock show about making comics.
I remember being introduced to metrics in the 5th grade at Bad X community school, and it was like we stayed with it for 2 weeks. The teacher's like, nah, screw it. We're not going to do any of this. Back to inches. It lasted 2 whole weeks. And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
All you need to know about America is when President Carter was in the office, they started putting metric road signs up.
Yeah.
And people were taking shotgun blasts to the metric road signs. That's all you need. That's America in a nutshell. That's like 7 definitions of America right there.
Everything you need to know.
I am his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I am excited, and the world needs to know. Brad and I are recording this in early to mid-January, and we have taken the longest break we've ever taken from recording Comic Lab. So we're now in year 7, correct, Brad?
That is correct.
And I think we just took 3.5 weeks off.
Easily.
So it's almost been a month that I fired up the mics with Brad Geiger. First of all, like President Nixon, he's tan, he's rested, he's ready to go. But it is weird to have gone that long without recording after 7 years of weekly recording.
And you can tell we're a little bit rusty because I'm stepping on your toes a little bit. You're over talking me just a little bit. We're out of the rhythm. You know, there's gonna be a little bit of editing that needs to happen on this show. I can tell because we're out of practice.
Yeah, we have the energy of, when you first grader gets home from school and you ask them how their day went, and they don't even finish the previous sentence before launching into. And then Billy found some Play-Doh, and then but then we also. That's the energy we're bringing into today's show, gang, is the excited first grader coming home from school. But anyway, so we've got a fun topic that I wanted to bring into the show this week. And it's one that I've been thinking about over the break because I've been trying to think about the larger arc of my career, sort of on more of an existential level than on your average day-to-day concern, which is what I sometimes do over the Christmas, New Year's break. One of the advantages to giving myself the time off, which I strongly recommend between Christmas and New Year's, is that it gives me a chance to think a little deeper and to you know what I mean, Brad, in terms of I'm not doing the surface scratch thoughts. I'm doing the where do I want to go? What do I want to be? How do I get there? Why am I doing it the way I'm doing it?
Yeah.
So the topic that I wanted to bring into the show, Brad, and I think this is an important one. As we get older as cartoonists, and as in general, our listeners get older as artists, we don't want discomfort anymore. Like one of the large swings that any human life tries to do is to increase its own comfort as a human life goes on. You know what I mean? So you graduate from the IKEA couch that shot a spring into your right butt cheek, and as you make a little more money, you get a more comfortable couch, right?
Yeah.
And as you realize in your 30s and 40s that, you know what, you didn't really like going out to clubs and bars because it was noisy and it was a lot of social interaction. So you stop doing that because it's discomforting to you. So you opt for comfort, which is to sit on your more expensive couch in your quiet house, and you take less risks, right? Yep. But here's the thing. I think as artists, Brad, we need discomfort to keep growing as artists and business people. You need to be uncomfortable. You need to take a risk in a way that is uncomfortable. You need to explore aspects of being an artist that you did in your teens and 20s and you kind of stopped doing once you found your groove in your 30s and your 40s.
Yeah.
And I wanted to open this topic up to you as a man of infinite wisdom. What is your take on that? Am I wrong in thinking that we need discomfort as we grow older?
You're 100% right. And you're right across the board. I mean, you said we need it as artists. We also need discomfort.
I just want to isolate that audio. Just David, you're right across the board.
Yes,
and just have it on a soundboard that I'll play in the podcast.
Yeah, just have Matt drop it in at different times throughout the show.
Yeah.
No, you not only is it right for artists, but it's right for us as business people. It's right as us as people who are using social media to do the different things that we want that to do. It's right across the board. And that is that we need discomfort because discomfort is what breeds creativity, right? It's like every time my kids used to tell me, I'm bored, I used to say, great. That's when creativity happens, when you're good and bored. And being bored is very discomfortable, right? Nobody wants to be bored. But that's when creativity happens. Yes. And that's the truth of art. That's the truth in business. We talked about in a couple of shows previous, we talked about a whole lot of discomfort that's probably coming our way in 2025.
Yeah. Oh, God, yes.
But the way that we have to approach that is not in squirming and pissing and moaning. Listen, I did plenty of that, right? But at some point, like my wife and I kind of have a thing when something like this happens in life. You get 48 hours to be good and pissy about this. And then you got to move on and start solving problems again, because you can't stay that way forever.
Yeah.
And believe me, I've used every one of my 48 hours at different times during my life. But at some point, that 49th hour comes and you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start moving forward. We have to, at some point, embrace this discomfort that's coming with the understanding that even though it's unpleasant and even though it sucks and even though it's going to throw some of us for a loop for a little while, that's when we are going to once again be called to the forefront as creative people. And you laugh every time I tell you, but creativity is a superpower. It's the ability to take something that's not there and put something there. And you're going to be asked as creative people to do that in art, in business, in social media, in all of those things. You're going to be asked to use your superpower this year.
I want to say first of all, I agree with you. I want to say, though, it's specifically about creativity as a superpower. One of the reasons why I smile whenever you say it is it's one of the rare times in our relationship as friends where we swap positions, where you become the wide-eyed optimist and I become the steely-eyed cynic, where I'm like, creativity is a superpower. And you're like, oh boy, creativity is a superpower. And so it delights me that you become the wide-eyed optimist with like, oh, the world is your oyster and everything can be made possible. Here's the thing, Brad is right. Creativity is a superpower. You are taking nothing and spinning it into something, or you are taking an existing thing and creating something new from it. And that is true. That is a superpower. That is the act of creation. You're right. So my question to you, Brad, because I do agree with your take on discomfort being important, and frankly, discomfort being important for leveling up to the next level of artist. Like, let's just think of it as a standard graph. If I'm at a 6, discomfort, if handled correctly, can actually help me level up to a 7 or an 8 as an artist, right? I've seen it in my career where like there was an uncomfortable period where, like let's say the advertising model in webcomics breaks down, or someone in my life was going through a tremendous crisis, and I was able to, I didn't see it at the time, but I was able to, over the course of 12 to 18 months, spin that into be me leveling up as an artist, right?
Yeah.
So here's my question to you, because you and I have largely built a career now that, if we wanted it to, could create pure comfort. You know what I mean? In the sense that, no, that's not true. We're still worried about money. We're still worried about income. We're still worried about things that are coming down the pipe. What I'm getting at is that you and I now have a track record of 20 years of like, no, I know how to cover my mortgage. I know what I have to do in worst case scenario. So how do we not only allow for discomfort, how do we take risks in a way that lets us continue to level up as artists? And I'm talking about everything in terms of like taking risks in the way we're drawing, taking risks in the way we do business, taking risks with the projects we take on, taking risks with the partners that we do make art with,
Yeah.
How do we continue to do that in a way? Like, here's what I'm getting at. When we were coming up as web cartoonists 20 years ago, right?
Right.
We've very often fell into conversations that often turn contentious with syndicated cartoonists. And they're like, and they would be saying to us, you are ruining the business. You don't realize what a cash cow syndication is. You guys are working for scraps comparatively online. And we were saying, we get that. We would love to have part of that syndication cash cow. Don't get us wrong.
Right.
But that world is dying. You don't see that world is dying because you're still communicating to 40, 50, 60-year-olds that are getting a newspaper. You don't realize that no 20 and 30-year-olds are getting a newspaper and that the world is going online and that the business model needs to change. That was the nature of our conversation. Right. But what they were doing on their end of things is they refused to get uncomfortable.
Right.
In both their art, the way they approached their business, and the way their art was distributed through their business,
Yeah.
And as a result, now 20 years later, granted, I think a lot of the 60-year-olds were able to ride it out and happily retire in syndication. But there was a youngerish generation that didn't adapt. Although now, to their credit, a lot of them are adapting by doing YA and graphic novels for Scholastic. I will grant them that. A lot of syndicated cartoonists.
The ones whose work fit into that category have been able to make that transition.
Right.
Yes.
But you see where I'm going with this, though, is that in the early 2000s, a lot of those cartoonists chose to not allow themselves to become uncomfortable, chose to not be discomfited. And so my question to you is, how do we, as we approach a comfortable stage in our career, continue to allow uncomfortableness into the process?
I don't know that I have a good answer for how do you do that. That isn't just don't do that, right? I mean, I don't have any advice for you there. But what I can tell you is that I remember that period of time very, very closely. I remember it very crisply in my memory. And whenever I get to a place like we're standing on the precipice of 2025, where where I'm looking towards a major sea change in how I do business, how we all do business, how we all do what we do, I remind myself not to make that same mistake that I saw an entire generation of cartoonists make before us, where they refused to look at that. They refused to consider that the world around them was changing, because the mistake they made was they saw the internet, they saw the effect that this was going to have on communications in general. It was very clear in the late 90s and early 2000s exactly where this tide was turning, and it was going to leave newspapers behind. It's a surprise to nobody that this has happened. They refused, and what they said was, like we said, oh, but listen, and we had these conversations. You can do this. You can put your comic up. You can publish yourself. You can do this. You can do that. And it just means maybe putting a WordPress site together, putting a website together. Later on, it was we talked about publishing on social media when that happened. And what we heard time and time again was, I don't want to learn how to do this all over again.
Yes.
I don't want to relearn. And I get it, especially in my mid 50s now. I get the idea of, it took me this long to learn how to do this. I don't want to relearn.
Yes.
And every time I'm in a position that, like I said, that we're looking at now going in, I warn myself that it is not okay to say, I don't want to learn something again. I don't want to relearn my business. I don't want to retool my business or my art or the direction my career is going. Because I've seen from that entire generation which direction that leads. And you're right. There's a whole group that has been able to kind of coast and hit retirement, and they're going to be just fine. But there was a whole bunch of people in the middle there that it hasn't been able to make the switch to young adult graphic novels because their work doesn't necessarily fit that.
Agreed.
And, they're going to be, they are actively in a very different period of time right now because they said, I don't want to learn to do something new. Right. And that's the moral for me. I don't know how to tell you how to not do that, but my message is you can't do that. You can't ever get to a point in your life, even when you're a couple of old farts like you and me, where we say to ourselves, I just don't want to learn that. I don't want to learn something new, because that we've seen from an entire generation exactly where that leads.
Yeah. And I that's a great way to say it. I don't want to learn something new, because really what you're doing when you allow yourself to be uncomfortable is you're basically committing to a phrase called continuing education. You are continuing to learn as you grow older. And I'll be honest, my failing on this front is in CSP. I fail to let myself be uncomfortable because I've never been able to figure out a way to uncomfortably fit it into my process of creating Sheldon or Drive or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so that's a failing on my part. But so yes, this is me admitting that I myself am a slave to comfort, and I don't want to allow myself to be uncomfortable. And I guess what I'm saying is, as I go into this next phase of my career, and by that I mean broadly speaking the next decade, is how do I take on projects and work with people and create things in a way that I'm not just doing the same thing. I'm not just producing year 30 of Love Is or Ziggy or, you know what I mean? Like, where it's like, there, and every cartoonist that did syndication sort of fell into this trap with decades, is that the same jokes kept coming out or the same process, because it was so comfortable to slip on those slippers of using the same joke or the same art supplies or the same process. Mm-hmm. And I basically, I don't know, maybe this is too big a swing, but I don't want to fall into that in my own career.
I think it's harder for that to happen to independent artists. And I'll tell you why. Because part of the reason that those syndicated cartoonists were able to do what they did was because they were a part of a larger organization. They didn't, they didn't see the effects of their decision making as quickly as you and I would see it. They weren't able to steer the ship. They weren't able to make changes. Mm-hmm. They were part of a larger organization. Some of the decisions were out of their hands. Some of them they didn't even know about. Some of the ramifications of the decisions weren't known to them. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. It's a lot more difficult to understand where you are in the landscape when a bunch of these decisions over here are being made by somebody else. You don't know the effects of those other decisions, and you can only make a very small number of decisions. And the reason that they made those same jokes over and over and over again was because they knew that they could do it. They knew that it would fit. They knew it was tried and true. And a lot of times when they tried to do other things, the one feedback that they did get immediately is, oh, you can't say that because there's a bunch of newspaper editors in the South that are going to throw a fit if you use that word or if you use that concept. So that breeds homogeneity. It breeds the sameness. So, okay, so every February, we're going to do a Groundhog Day a week. Every March, we're going to do a week on St. Patrick's Day, and it's going to be the same old leprechaun with a pot of gold, because I know that that's safe, right? Being an independent, on the other hand, number one, we see cause and effect much more clearly. When we screw up, we know about it pretty quick.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And at the same time, we have to keep our ear to the ground. We have to stay alert. And
we see the causality of our actions immediately, both in creativity and in business. Yeah.
Because it's up to us. It's up to us. There's nobody else who's going to do it. If I don't make a decision about the books that I print in the first quarter, hopefully here, where I'm going to print them, how I'm going to print them, et cetera, et cetera. If I don't make that decision isn't going to get made, and I'm going to suffer for it because it's going to affect my bottom line. I have to make that decision. And because I have to make that decision, and because I've got to stay open to it, that's going to keep me from being somebody who just lets things happen to them. I say being an independent is a big part of, hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully I'm not full of it again, is what's going to help us through here, because we have to do it. And that's going to keep us from getting too complacent. And I think a lot of this comes down to complacency.
I think you're right. And it's funny because I hadn't put that together, that partially why syndicated cartoonists were averse to risks or things is because they had a whole career, decades, where, you know that Japanese phrase, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down? Have you ever heard that phrase from Japan? The idea of conformity. But that was absolutely the watchword in syndicated comics, is that as soon as you tried something new or different or slightly risque, you were hammered down. And so that breeds a career where you're like, well, then F it. I'm not going to take any risks. I'm not going to try anything shocking or new materials or new presentational styles or... You're right. And I think even further than that, you're right that because we're in charge of our business, we both see the causality of our actions and what works and what doesn't work, but also that we also know the basic causality that if we don't do the thing doesn't get done.
Right. Well, and there's another, you taught me this phrase. It's difficult to get somebody to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. And that's what we saw with syndicated cartoonists. Right? We saw their salary depended on them not understanding the web and where the web was going. Because let's face it, there was a few of them, we could probably name a couple of them, that actually got it. They understand where it was going. They could see it on the horizon just as clearly as you and I could, but they couldn't do anything about it. They were making their money in syndication. They were making good money in syndication. And they didn't have the luxury of saying, okay, well, I'm going to go do this other thing now. They had to go with what was paying the mortgage at the time. Their salary depended on them not understanding it. And that's maybe an unfair metaphor, because I think they understood it. They just couldn't do anything about it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I, like you, I won't name them, but I can think of 3 or 4 syndicated cartoonists that absolutely understood what was happening, what was coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
But like you said, they were suffering, and another way of saying it is there's a thing called the innovator's dilemma, where because they basically had golden handcuffs with income currently in syndication that was so good, they couldn't innovate to try something new. It's the same reason why like GM and Ford are having so much trouble going to electric cars and why Tesla or BYD are eating their lunch, because if you're established, it's harder to innovate because you have all these factories and middle managers and machining that is meant to build an internal combustion engine. And so it's hard to innovate. So that's the innovator's dilemma. And so with syndication, they had these golden handcuffs of actually at that point still good paychecks.
Yes.
And so why would they innovate? Because they would actively be hurting what was still at that point pretty good paychecks. You know what I mean? So they could see the writing on the wall, but they couldn't make the switch because it was like, well, now I'm taking food off of my plate in front of me for a hoped for meal that will be smaller down the road, you know? That's
where you have to really take your hat off to Bill Holbrook, who was a syndicated cartoonist, who was also one of the first web cartoonists that when he launched Kevin and Kel, right? There's a guy that saw it and had the ability to kind of start that boat out on that one stream, so that as things went down the line, he was able to, he wasn't caught flat-footed. You got to, when you look at that guy's career, you've got to really hand it to him, because he was one of the few that did get it and did something about it, right? I always take a look at that and think about how prescient that move was. That was a very smart thing to do that I'm sure he's happy that he did, looking back on it now.
Right. Well, I was, okay, so to finish off this topic, part of my Christmas to New Year's thinking, where I have no shoes on and I'm sitting outside in a comfortable environment and just sitting with a coffee.
You mean you weren't shoveling snow? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
That's But anyway, here are the 4 areas that I isolated where I think I need to continue to be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Number 1 is I know that if I pull the right levers and push the right buttons, I can make X amount of money by making a Drive book or a Sheldon book. But what other kind of project can I make that requires more risk and more uncomfortableness, much like a Stripped, the documentary film that I made that took 4 years that I had no idea if I would ever make any money back on, right?
Yeah.
That's number 1. Or number 2, there was a physical product that we made here in the studio that was a magnetic build-your-own comic strip set, which didn't sell hugely well, but I'm incredibly proud of it because it was such a different and risk-taking project to work with magnets, figure out what that process was, figure out how many magnets we could afford, figure out how to make a comic strip out of magnets. Like, that was just fun. It was fun and different, right? So that's number 1 is like, figure out what my next risk-taking project is, right?
Yeah.
Number 2 is figure out what my next risk-taking art creation method is. And that might be CSP, it might be watercolors, I need basically to take a risk in how I make marks, physically make marks onto
interesting.
Digitally or physically, right? So that's number 2. Yeah. Number 3 is I need to figure out a way that perhaps I need to make myself uncomfortable. Like Beth and I, my wonderful assistant Beth and I, have figured out a 1-2 punch. And I keep coming back to this. I'm trying to figure out a way that maybe I need to make myself uncomfortable by bringing in a third person in a way to up my volume of output even more. With the caveat that might not be able to happen until my kids go to college, because I am currently the logjam on 95% of our projects. You know what I mean? Because if I don't do a thing, it can't start. Like Beth can execute on the coloring, Beth can execute on the book production, but I have to start the thing. You know what I mean? And so right now, I can't bring in a third employee or second employee because until my kids go to school, I'm limited on time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the 4th thing that I want to take risk on more is projects themselves. Sheldon and Drive have reached a stasis where I know how to do it.
Yep.
There's no risk artistically or creatively for me making Sheldon and Drive. I really do think that I need a new project. And an extension of that is the anatomy books. I know how to do those now. You know what I mean? I've done 4 of them. I can write those, no problem at all. So I need to either do a children's book or a second film project or a new comic title somewhere in the next 5 years to give myself a little risk again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of wake myself up creatively. Any thoughts on those 4? Like, am I missing something big that I'm not seeing?
No, I would not. And I everything you've said there is not only makes perfect sense, but it's very exciting to think of you doing any number of those things. Right. That, like, to think of you taking the leap to CSP, I think is very exciting. I think it would open up some real avenues for you.
I do too. Yeah.
The idea of another assistant or to open that studio up in some way, I think that is amazing.
Yeah,
like,
I love
all
the
those
idea
things.
of a kind of a mangaka studio setup.
Or
I
think I'm just spitballing here, even to open up to like a quarterly mentorship where, you spend a little bit of time, and I don't know whether I'm pitching this to you or to me, but a quarterly mentorship where we say, okay, we're going to meet at the beginning of the week. I'm going to give you some things to do. I'm going to also, in exchange for that, maybe help guide you through a few things and show you how to do certain things. I agree with you
because honestly, now at this age and stage in my career, I can see where, like, if I brought in a 22-year-old for some sort of fun, like, internship,
Right.
I'm 90% of the time I'm giving to them, right?
Yes.
Like that's the honest truth is I just want to pay it forward. But 10% really what I really want, like a vampire, is the energy of a 22-year-old around me
Yes.
that is constantly experimenting and trying new things because to them, everything is new. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that to me seems exciting. I agree with you. Yes.
I I like the idea of a mentorship or even doing like a quarterly or, 6 months, and, biannual mentorship program. Right. I do like that. But the funny thing is that how similar you and I are in that, like in December, we start scaling way back on the comic, right? And there, I don't know how much we talked about this in the shows going up. We should make a note in November of this year to start giving people. We always tell people, hey, take a little break, do this, do that. You don't have to work that. But we never tell them how to do it. Right. Like I took a big break, but I didn't hardly miss any. In fact, I think December I hit 30 updates, 30 posts on Patreon for December, even though I took a big step back. And there's all kinds of strategies for doing that my backers probably hardly noticed, if they noticed at all. I'm going to make a note for us to talk about that in November. But you and I both do the same thing. In December, we start gearing up for the entire next year. And if you remember, in January of 2024, I talked about, in fact, I was just transferring things over from my date book, for my 2024 calendar to my 2025 calendar. And I had a whole bunch of things that I was planning on doing, a lot of new things that I was planning on approaching and launching. One of those was the web ring, which it took me all year. But that is not only has that.
By the way, a great risk. I applaud you again for it. Yes, that's the definition of what I'm talking about being uncomfortable.
It's been working out really well. In fact, we do every other Sunday we get together for a Discord chat to touch base because it's starting to become a thing now. It's starting to coalesce. It's starting to get a little momentum. And I really feel good about that. We've already got some people who are taking the lead on launching some different things that are going to be under that umbrella. But it's been this is my week in the promo box this week. So I'll be able to tell you better at the end of the week what it did.
I'm fascinated to see what the results of that are. Yeah.
You and me both. Because I also did some experimenting in that. Like I didn't point them to the website. I pointed them to specific places in storylines. I pointed them at merchandise. I'm very interested to see how that's going to work out. But I had a whole bunch of stuff for 2024, and I did the same thing as you. I spent a lot of December thinking about, okay, what's going to be the big swings in 2025? And I've got 2 or 3 things, one of which you've already seen. And in fact, one of which I think got a little bit of an eye roll from you. We won't talk about what it is yet, but it's basically what I was thinking this year is if I do have a major upheaval in my business, I need, just like Bill Holbrook, I need to have some ships that are already sailing on the waters, that I'm not caught flat-footed, that I have things that are already out there floating around that I can jump to. And I've done a couple of those that I've already started, and I've got a couple others that are listed in my January to-do list. And some of them might take the entire year, like that web ring did. But that's kind of, it's so funny how you and I are the same. We spent all of December kind of, rubbing our hands together, maniacally thinking, okay, what's 2025 going to be? What am I going to get excited about? What new things am I going to do? Because we both have certain things that, like you said, I can do Evil Inc. I can do After Dark. I can do a bunch of things. I can do the webcomics handbook stuff. All of that is very part of my standard week. Now, what am I going to do that's new? Right? Because that's kind of the privilege of being a full-time cartoonist, is that now that we've got this part settled, Now we can act. And if you think about it, what we're doing is actively finding discomfort to embrace.
Yes.
Right? Now that we've got a certain established business, now we're going to go out there and find the discomfort that we can choose. And that's kind of what it's all about. That's kind of what this whole conversation is about. I'm kind of surprising myself saying it. These things that you and I are talking about, we're actively looking for the discomfort that we can embrace.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before on Comic Lab. It might have been a few years ago, but every once in a while, I like to review what I call my Soviet 5-year plan. Like, remember how the Soviet Union, Brad, used to set like production goals for wheat every 5 years, right? To me, these attempts at discomfort are sort of my stab at my next 5-year goals. Yeah. So those 4 things that I identified a minute ago, hopefully over the course of the next 5 years, not this year necessarily, but over the course of the next 5 years, you will see me tackle new ways to make things, physical books, new employees that I might bring in, new projects that I might start, all of which are under the umbrella of make yourself a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that you don't suffer from a billion problems of stasis, which I see happening and happened to many cartoonists' careers.
Yeah. Embrace discomfort, I think, is the is the bottom line here. We're telling you to embrace discomfort.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Well, listen, as discomfortable as it is for me to switch into a new topic without a buttery smooth transition, I'm just going to tell you that we've got an update. Dave, you wanted to talk about this great thing, this new Blue Sky feature that a very wise person turned you on to.
Absolutely, Brad. I wanted to talk specifically about Blue Sky. There is an account called Listifications. And you can find that at bsky.app/profile/listifications.app, right? And a very handsome cartoonist turned me on to this. We won't need to say their name, but we can say their name rhymes with Vlad Snygar. And Vlad, that's a great name. It's not like Vlad, it's Vlad. That seems like a belly joke somehow. Yeah, exactly. So Vlad Snygar turned me on to this app, and basically, actually, why don't we have Vlad describe it? What is Listifications do, Vlad?
What Listifications does is it enables you to find out if somebody has added you to a list or if somebody has blocked you. So all you do is once you follow Listifications on Blue Sky, they will send you a DM anytime somebody has added you to a list or if somebody has blocked you. And it's kind of fascinating to find out both of those things. Like the circumstances behind either one of those is kind of interesting.
And I will tell on myself, first of all, I'm delighted by it because anytime you get more data on how people are viewing you, it's very helpful, right? And so just on a general level, also, it's kind of an innovation in that Blue Sky is allowing for innovations that Twitter had stopped doing. Yep. And this kind of feels new to me in that, like, I'm seeing in real time what lists I'm being added onto. And a lot of the lists, I'll be honest, are like Susan's fave comics. And so you can figure out what that is. Yeah. That's someone who's basically created a list for themselves. Like, here's the 30 that I would like to occasionally check in on. And you kind of go, okay, that's fine. That's lovely. Thanks, Susan, whoever you are, for adding me to your list. But then I will be honest that I am so small, Brad.
Yes.
When someone blocks me and I don't understand why I've been blocked.
No.
Why am I being blocked, Brad? Just don't follow me. You won't see me again. Why am I being blocked? I mean, I guess what it is there's sort of 3 tabs on the Blue Sky app. There's people you follow. There's friends of friends, and then what's the other one? Suggested or something?
Yeah, there's follow, discover, and popular with friends.
That's right. Follow, discover, popular with friends. I think popular with friends, that algorithm, or follow is somehow suggesting me to people. And they're like, I cannot stand Dave Kellett's comics.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this anymore. The only way to get rid of it, as far as I know, is to block him. Which I sort of like, you know what, more power to you. I appreciate that you're able to tailor your feed to be what you want it to be. But I will admit a smallness, Brad, a smallness that it's only happened to me, I don't know, 8-10 times where someone has blocked me and I'm like, why? Why?
Yeah.
What did I do? What specifically was it? What did I go wrong?
No one is more perplexed about you getting blocked than I am. Because it's like, I get blocked, but I get it. I post usually when I post and I try to do it like 2:00 in the morning Eastern time. So it's like well after anybody's going to be looking at their Blue Sky in the grocery line and have like an Evelink After Dark promotion come up on their feed, right? I try to time that as well as I can. I'm sure it's not perfect for everybody in the world, but I try to be very sensitive about the images that I choose and the times that I post it. But usually every time I post an After Dark promotion, I find out in the morning I got blocked by somebody. And that's, by the way, perfectly fine. In fact, if you don't want that showing up in your feed, I want you to block me. I don't want my stuff to get in front of somebody who doesn't want to see it.
Exactly.
I'm perfectly comfortable with that. And so I see Spice Rack, the Blue Sky account gets blocked quite a bit. Mine every now and again gets blocked. The thing that perplexes me is when the Blue Sky account gets blocked by somebody and I find out that they're an NSFW artist, right? That I don't understand. I don't get why you're blocking that. But the one that's even more, it's like, why would anybody block Dave Kellett?
Honestly,
that is beyond me.
No, it's perfectly. This is why I'm saying it's small on my part, because it is perfectly fair that for some reason, some algorithmic or friend recommendation keeps putting my art in front of you, and you're like, I just don't like Dave Kellett's comics. Stop feeding me this, right? That, by the way, you and me, that's perfectly fair. There are people that I love that for some reason the algorithm keeps pushing them both on I follow them, they're in the, I should follow them feed, and then they're popular with friends. I'm like, for God's sakes, can we just figure out how to, like, I'm already following them. I don't need to see it in all 3 feeds.
I've seen the same post too many times. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's say that even for someone that I love and I'm actively following, I'm feeling like I'm seeing this too much. Yeah. Imagine if you don't like Dave Kellett and that son of a bitch keeps coming up in your feeds. Eventually, you'll be like, you know what? Just block it. I'm just going to block it. Yeah. That's fine. And yet, I just want to admit, as an update to the world, there is such a smallness in the occasion where someone has blocked me. I'm like, what did I do? What did I do?
What did I do? Doesn't everybody love young Dave Kellett?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a good place to share a little bit of advice here because of where we've been really all in on Blue Sky in the past several months. Yes. And we've been encouraging our people to jump in. This is a good time to share some Blue Sky advice, and that is to understand where we are in the progression of Blue Sky as a social media network. Yes. We're very early, so it's not super controlled by an algorithm, right? You have to understand what that means and pair that with the fact that since it's new, most people don't have hundreds and thousands of accounts that they're following. You need to understand, as somebody who's posting regularly on Blue Sky, what that means. And what it means is this: you cannot post over and over again within a short period of time. In other words, what's going to happen is, let's say you make a post at 1 o'clock, and then you make a post at 1:15 o'clock, and then you make a post at 1:20 o'clock, and then you make a post at 1:25 o'clock.
Stop, it's hurting my brain. Stop saying it.
But seriously, what's going to happen is, because of where we are in social media progression, it's very likely to any one of your followers that they scroll through and they see each one of those in succession. And it's all you. You post this, you post that, you post the next thing. And
it's too much.
You better hope they love each one of those 5 posts, because if they don't, what's going to happen is they're going to say, who's posting this? Oh, it's this guy. And he retweeted 3 things and he posted 2 things of his own, and he's annoying the fuck out of me. And that's where you're going to get it. That's when you're going to get blocked.
Yeah.
You got to understand where we are in social media progression here. You need to space out your posts a little bit. If you jam up somebody's feed with your posts and they don't like it, that's an unfollow for sure, and possibly a block.
I also think, first of all, I agree with Brad and the reason why that's happening. I also think one of the reasons why I might be getting blocked is Blue Sky is new to people, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's still kind of figuring out. It takes 6 to 12 months to figure out a new social media platform and all the weird idiosyncrasies. And I think what happened is a lot of people jumped onto Blue Sky. They saw these starter packs, which are a great innovation. Like, there is no doubt. It's one of the coolest things that Blue Sky has is an innovation. Yeah. And so I think a lot of people jumped on like, oh, cartoonists, you should follow starter pack. Didn't realize that Dave Kellett was in the starter pack.
Right.
And then kind of now can't figure out why I'm appearing on their feed and like, how do I get rid of this guy? Yeah. And maybe didn't realize that they were following me. I'm being sincere about this. Yes, and I think it's just like, you know what? Block this SOB. I don't know how he got onto my feed, because they clicked yes on a starter pack that had 150 cartoonists on it, probably, is what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? There's all of this to say, there's a million reasons why my smallness should not be honored in terms of being mad that I got blocked. Yeah. But it just speaks to the fact that no matter how old you get, no matter how successful along in your career, the smallness of someone saying, somewhat to your face, I don't like the comics of Brad Geiger. Yeah. It will sting. It'll still hurt even in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s as a cartoonist, you know?
I'll tell you what's worse. Than getting blocked. I got added to somebody's list, and the list says medium priority. That, you know what? I'd rather be blocked than to be medium priority.
Greg's list of so-so comics. You know, exactly.
Medium priority?
Medium priority.
Excuse me. Medium priority? No, that's an insult. I block me. Just if you're going to put me on a list called medium priority, you might as well block me.
That's like getting added to a list that's called like comics to read when you're stuck at the airport, or comics to read when you're waiting for the dentist. Yeah. You're like, I know what this is. Don't put me on your medium priority list. This
priority.
I don't want the medium priority. Oh, Brad.
Yeah.
Oh,
what
my
kind
God.
of list is that?
But anyway, so try out listifications. It might be for you. It might not be. Like, I'm actively debating whether I take myself off it, because I'm like, is this benefiting me, or is it just occasionally triggering insecurity? Yeah. I don't know.
I like it because, again, I feel, especially dealing in NSFW, I need to know if there's like one particular thing that's not fitting well with like maybe an entire demographic or something. I gotta keep my ear to the ground on that, since because I'm dealing with a sensitive topic. I want to know if I post something and it gets a whole bunch of blocks, then it's something I got to be aware of. But you're right. It is every time I see that little chat thing, I know. By the way, it kind of changes your Blue Sky experience, because it used to be if I got a DM, I was excited. Hey, somebody's talking to me. This is great. Maybe, maybe who knows what's going on. Somebody wants to talk directly to Brad Geiger. That's amazing. And now it's either listifications telling me I blocked, or somebody put me on a medium priority list, or it's somebody who's clearly a bot, who's, this very pretty AI picture saying, hello, I am new to your country, and what would you like to talk about today? And I'm like, yeah, I'm old enough to know that you don't care about what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, first of all, you're an AI. Second of all, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know where I stand.
So anyway, the update for this week's show is listifications, and I think, honestly, it's kind of fun to try it.
Yeah.
You may be underwhelmed by how many notifications you get from listifications at first, but I think as your audience grows, you'll see a growing number of both lists like medium priority that you get added to, and people that put you on their block lists.
Oh,
so
like the block list. I got put on a block list of furry cartoonists. I'm like, I'm not even a furry cartoonist. I don't know how I got on this list.
I mean, listen, you personally are very furry. That
Yes.
Van Dyke doesn't grow itself. That's
well, I tell you what did grow itself. No, that's not a good transition. I'll tell you what.
I kind of want to not edit that out. That was amazing.
I was trying so hard for a transition. Well, how about this, Dave? It's 12:47 o'clock, and that means that it's time for me to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
And once again, a reminder that this is a delayed broadcast. It is not actually 12:47 o'clock where you are. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the number one list, the number one name at the top of the So-So Comics list, and the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by our friend who's not on the medium priority list. He's on the high priority list.
Top priority.
Matt Woodard over at Woodsong Productions. He can be found at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And thank you so much for giving us those 5-star reviews on Spotify. If you haven't gotten a chance to put yours on there yet, please take a moment and do so. You are really helping us get this show out to a whole new batch of cartoonists who are telling us that they love discovering it. So thank you for playing a part in that.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say this twice. Patreon.com/ if you're on that furry list that blocked Brad, please let him know why you blocked him from the furry list. And also, if you want to make me uncomfortable, CC me on that email about why you blocked Brad from the furry list.
Oh, my God. Now the question is, how many lists can we put you on that would make you uncomfortable?
Oh, there's a lot, Brad. I'll be honest. There's a lot of lists that could make me uncomfortable.
I think I just want to start making lists and put you on it just so I can hear you talk about it the next day.
Just to imagine me sweating, all of a sudden cold sweating in my studio. Listen, look up Pollyanna in the dictionary. It's just a little photo of me staring back at you. Oh boy! Oh, the world is a bright and happy place. Wait, what list did I get added on to?
Well, that's the first list I'm putting you on, my Polly list.